So we're going to talk about data science career guide. I've done this event many times. I forgot how many times I've done this. Today, I would like to do it in a slightly different way. We're going to reverse engineer data science job search. Yeah, I'd encourage you to ask a lot of questions along the way. I use Notion. This is something I've been working with and loving for quite a few months, and it makes me very productive, on a daily basis. So I'm just going to type up notes today as we go through it. So it helps you understand my thought process when it comes to data science job search, how to get started with data science, and hopefully this is useful for everyone. To begin with, we have some useful resources we would like to share with you. We do have a Discord community. We offer some free courses, so you can, I think Adam will share the link with you guys on Zoom. So yeah, you can join our Discord community, and we have a learning portal called WeCloud Open. So you can go to learn.weclouddata.com and create an account, and we have some free courses. Right now we have self-paced Python SQL courses, but we're adding more. And some of the workshop recordings will be uploaded to WeCloud Open, but you can find them mostly on YouTube as well. So just go to youtube.com/WeCloudData, and you'll find some of those event recordings. I'm going to talk about the career guide. We do have a data science career guide. We'll go through that today. Yeah, but this is what I would like to do. So let's reverse engineer data science job search. So as we know, like if you want to, get into a new career path, typically what people do is you're going to do some research. You need to figure out which direction to go. You'll need to, decide if you would like to become a data scientist or data engineer. So you're going to do all the research, talk to people, and figure out which path is better. And then you need a learning path, right? So you're going to follow a structured learning path, and you start learning Python, SQL, data science, machine learning, and then you need to work on projects along the way, and then you need some help with mentorship, career job search, and then you're going to get interviews. So we're going to start from there. So data science, oh, sorry. Well, let's talk about data science interviews first. And I would like to sort of talk about some of the questions you're going to get from a typical data science interview. And I would like to address how you should be preparing for those interview questions, because if your goal is to switch to data science, and I think you have to understand, like, in order to get a job, what are some of the requirements, right? It's not just about the skills, because when you take a course, whether it's from a boot camp, from a university, you're really just learning the skills. But in today's competitive job market, having the skills is not enough. It's just the first step, right? Interview job search, I think there are like a skill set on its own. So let's try to understand this first. What's required, right, by employers? What's required in those? What's going to happen in those interviews? What kind of questions are you going to get? And then we'll talk about how to prepare for those. Okay, so let's. I don't think we'll have time. This is not an interview preparation session, so we'll not have time to go through, 20 different interview questions. I'm going to ask 3 most frequently asked questions, or questions that I think are very important, and you have to nail those questions, right? And the first question is, tell me about yourself, or tell me about your experience, right? And typically, companies will want to know the kind of experience you have. And the next question will be, why are you the best candidate? Or simply put, why should we hire you? Right? Well, let's begin with the first one. tell us about yourself. You can send your questions or your comments to Zoom chat. I would love to hear from you because I think we've all gone through some sort of interviews. Imagine this is a data scientist interview. You're going to interview for a technical data science position, whether it's in a startup or in a big company. Usually, how are you going to answer this type of questions? Or I'm curious to know, what are employers looking for when they ask this kind of questions? Any comments? So, education. Thanks, Mariam. What else? Skill set. Okay. Thought, of course, soft skills. I really like what Robert's saying. The question itself is a lot more pointed, that it seems you need to tell them about yourself in a way that's relevant to the role. That's on point. That's something I would like to talk about. But let's see what everybody else says. They like to see if you're a good fit for the team in terms of likability. Yeah. Mentality. Okay, cool. These are all good answers. But let's try not to answer, because I think we need to understand what exactly they're looking for, right? When they want you to introduce your experience, they ask this in different ways. Sometimes the question begins with just tell me about yourself, and you need to give them, your best pitch in maybe 1 to 2 minutes, right? And for the pitch, you need to be more general. And then they will ask you follow-up questions, because very soon, I think they will want to jump to the experience section. They care more about your past 2 experiences, right? The jobs you worked at or the projects you've done, because ultimately they're looking for someone who's a good fit. And of course, like likability, first impression, these are all important. But if you don't have the right experience, it's very hard to stand out. And most of the time, if on your resume you don't have a relevant skill set, then you get filtered out by the ATS systems, right? Those automation systems. And when the hiring manager is looking at your resume, if you don't have the right experience, then they're probably not going to give you an interview. And during the interviews, I think they're going to zoom in on your experience. They have a lot of questions, because it's only the real experience or the project experience that will help them understand whether you're a good fit. How do we define good fit? It really depends on the company's, the hiring goals. But I think most of the time, the good fit, right, it's a combination of different things. It's definitely not like, okay, we need to hire the person who's the best. I mean, for the company is not always looking for the most skilled candidate. And that's because the best candidate might not even be actively looking for jobs. They're passive, right? And or the best candidate, they get multiple offers easily, and you may not be able to afford them, or they may not even think that the job is that exciting for them to stay longer than 12 months, right? And so when you look at the job description, it's usually like they want everything. But it's not the reality. The reality is that the best candidates, you either cannot afford them, just like, Jane Street will pay people on average, 600,000, 800,000, right? For a quant position, even higher than Google and Facebook. But they're looking for someone who's like really amazing background from Harvard, whatever. But just look at the job market in general for data science, data analytics, and data engineer. It's already very, high paying, jobs, right? One of the top 10 jobs out there. But still, companies, cannot always get the best candidate they want. So they will lower their hiring, criteria. And usually ended up happening is that they can't get hold of, some of the best candidates. And that's why companies like to ask for referral. Like they ask their team members, do you know anyone in your network that you think are good, right? But when they start to review resumes, there'll be hundreds of them, right? We posted an part-time operations assistant job back in June. And in a matter of a week, even WeCloud Data got 700 applicants. So the job market is very competitive, right? So having skill set is not enough. And your personality matters, right? The way you talk and, do you fit in a team? Or a lot of times employers will think, try to assess whether the team members will like to work with you, or as a hiring manager, do I think that I'll enjoy working with you, right? So the conversation obviously is very important. But I would say the most important thing is, do you have the right experience, right, to get the work done? My personal experience, working with a lot of students, working with employers, or, I have friends who are hiring managers. I found that nowadays companies are not very or I should say hiring managers are not that patient. Unlike before, they don't really expect to spend, they don't have a plan to say that, okay, I'm going to spend 2 years, 12 months to mentor this junior data scientist and turn this person into a very good data scientist. Because first of all, the hiring manager may not even stay on the job for longer than 12 months. And there are a lot of great opportunities out there. And then I think people switch jobs a lot more frequently than before, than a couple of years ago. And then we just went through COVID, right? Departments are fighting for budget and stuff. Like when you don't have a lot of budget, or you finally got a head count, you just want to hire someone who can do the work. So I feel like employers are like less likely to want to hire junior, data scientists. It's kind of different from before. So they always care about experience. So it's a long way to say this, but I think the most important part is just you need to show people that you have the experience, or at least you can prove that you can get the work done. And how do we evaluate that, right? Then, of course, we need to look at your education background. But basically, when companies care about your education background, it's only because they want someone with a master's degree, they want someone from a top tier school. It's all just like risk. They're doing some sort of risk management, but coming from the top school or graduate from a master's program doesn't really mean that you're the best candidate for this job. I think a lot of companies start to realize that. So in my past experience, I think unless it's a very specialized deep learning or ML research type of role, companies will tell you that they prefer PhDs. Most of the data analytics and data science or data engineering jobs, education is not the most important factor. So that's why I'll always recommend job applicants to put education at the bottom. You definitely don't want to put that on the top of your resume, because, first of all, people understand where to find education information. It's usually at the bottom of the page. And you also don't want to highlight the fact that you just graduated. That means you don't have much experience unless you have a lot of, co-op or internship experience, right, in the past. So from my perspective, education is not the most important, and skill set is very important. And that's why when you structure your one-page resume, unless you have more relevant experience, but if, for most of the career switchers, please only have one-page resume, right? Because you don't have a lot more stuff to add. Like it has to be relevant. So skill set should be on the top. I wouldn't even recommend summary of qualifications. People usually like have the top section under the contact information on your resume will be, a bunch of bullet points describing yourself and your experience. But people don't like considering that I have a few hundred or maybe 50 resumes, after the recruiters, have screened the resumes. I still have like 20, 30, 50 resumes to go through. I just don't have time to look at the bullet points. When I look at a resume, I typically know what I want. I'm looking for experience. I'm looking for skill set, right? Skill set, I'm not looking for someone who knows everything, because definitely there are things you can learn. I'm looking for someone who has a strong foundation. For some particular positions, like they're working with specific tools, and maybe there's a hard requirement saying that you have to know this tool. And if you don't have that experience, then maybe you get filtered out, right? But most likely I'm looking for a balance. Like, are you more specialized in machine learning, or the only thing you show on the resume is machine learning and deep learning? Or you actually know more about cloud computing, you understand, data analytics, visualization, but that depends on the job requirement. So skill set is very important. You need to put on the top. The summary of qualification, it's just my opinion, but I don't think people has a lot of time to read it, because it's really just a summary of your experience. Then I would rather just jump to the experience section right away, because when I'm looking at your resume, I know I have 30 other resumes to look at. So I want this to be really quick. So something has to stand out for me to spend more time. So having the right skill set definitely is important. Right? You need to focus on that. And that's something you're going to build up over time when you start to learn data science. Right? But again, experience is the most important part. So, okay. Someone mentioned soft skill, and then of course I'm going to put experience here. Soft skills. Usually people put soft skills in summary of qualifications, right? Or skill set, and people say I have good time management, I have good communication skills. For data jobs, my recommendation is put those under your work experience. You want to show people that you communicate with people, communicate with leadership, you communicate with product team, marketing teams in your job, right? But it's not necessary to mention that in the skill set section, because I sort of expect that. You don't have to tell me you have good time management. I'd rather you show that, right? If you say you have really good communication skills, I can tell, because we're going to have a conversation. So you don't really have to highlight that, I think. And the reason why we're doing this is because, people nowadays, prefer one-page resume, right? If you have a lot of years of relevant experience, I think 2-page makes sense. But for someone who's switching career, you want that to be really concise. The screen real estate is very important. And that means you're going to cut out the things that are not that important and just focus on the things that matter. So skill set, definitely on the top. Education, move that to the bottom. Anything soft skill related, leadership related, you need to put that in, sort of integrate that into your actual experience. And that will be, so much more helpful. So after skill set on your resume, you need to have experience. And likability, right? Whether you have the right mentality, they may have some other, question they are going to ask you. For example, what is your strength, or tell me about your weakness, or have you, tell me one of the tough projects or, failure you've had, all kinds of questions, and they will be able to judge and tell. But experience is the most important, part on your resume. And I think most of the career switchers, the struggle is, how do I get the relevant experience on my resume, right? Because if data science is very hard, because it's actually one of the fields that allow for people, career switchers to join, because no company is going to require that you have to graduate from a master's of data science program. It's relatively new, even though there are a lot of programs out there. Employers are looking for people who actually just can get the work done. So project experience, is as important. So if you don't have relevant work experience in data science, I think that's okay. But you need to figure out the best way to structure a resume so that your project experience will stand out. But what qualifies as a good experience, right? I'm sort of talking about this from a career switcher's back perspective. So I assume that you don't have data scientist, or you don't have senior data analyst related positions, let's say, on experience on your resume, right? And that's what most people are struggling about. So direct related experience, of course, that would be the best, right? It could be a co-op or internship. If you've done that in the past, then that would be great. And some sort of real projects you have worked on, right? And then after that, I think your portfolio project will become very important. Now, what about your not so relevant, right? Work experience. Here's my take. By working with a lot of students and also worked as a hiring manager in the past. If you have 5 to 10 years of experience, you worked on 2 to 3 jobs in the past, and none of them are related to data science or data analytics, at most keep one of them. And I would like to minimize that on the resume. So what you can keep on the resume is anything related to, strong communication, leadership, product management experience, project management experience, right? Or anything that's related to this industry or this, to this company, right? I think it'll be nice to put there, but don't put more. You don't need like 7, 8 bullet points for your past experience if it's not related to data science, because ultimately the interview is about whether you can do this job, and people are going to ask you like, where you come from, what's your background. So you actually want to minimize that because you want to highlight the relevant experience, right? Your strength, right? You may have worked as a manager, director. You have great skill set, very successful in the past. Now you decide to switch career. So your past experience has been your advantage, but it's not an advantage in this context. So you can remove them. Filling those blanks with your portfolio project experience will be much more relevant because it's all about whether you can do this job, right? That's my one of my recommendations, because by working with a lot of students, I get it. Sometimes you just don't want to remove the past work experience because you feel like it's still very you're very proud of your past experience. But if it's not related to the job, then I recommend you remove it. If you have a 1-page resume, if you have 2-page structure, then you can definitely put more. But I can tell you, it's not going to help you that much. So the question comes down to, so how do I build this, the relevant experience if I would like to stand out? There are a couple of ways. Most people will start from portfolio project building, right? And then there's some, real client project, for example. WeCloud Data offers real client project opportunities. And the best experience is also if you have actually worked with some companies. It could be you work as a freelancer, you work with a client and you help client to build solutions, data science solutions. That would be the best experience, right? And you even did some business development. Or it could be working with a startup that happens to be your friend or people in your network, and you got an opportunity to work on real project. But whatever you do, make sure that the project needs to have really good scope, right? Try to avoid working on projects that's, the data set is from Kaggle and you just download a CSV file and you just train a bunch of machine learning models. I can tell you this stopped working for a while because there's so many training schools out there, right? There's master's program, online courses. Everyone knows that they need to build projects, and most of those projects are very similar. So knowing how to train a machine learning model, right? That doesn't really differentiate you. And we're talking about the fit here. So how would I know that if you know how to train a machine learning model, then how does that translate to the real job performance, right? It doesn't translate that much because so that's why I need to see something that's more impressive, right? And a lot of that requires a lot of extra hard work. You can have a blog post that goes with your project. You can have a, for example, Medium blog post, right? You have everything uploaded to GitHub. Most of the time, those efforts are not useful because people just don't look at it. But what we care about is like maybe there are 1 or 2 hiring managers who look at it and they're impressed. So you also need to make sure that the blog post and the project you work on is indeed good quality, right? So that's actually a lot of hard work. But yeah, so building portfolio project or working on whatever freelance project, real project, make sure that the scope is good and it's as close to real life as possible. What do I mean by that? So if you work on a real life data science projects, right, you're rarely just given a data set and say, well, just write 10 lines of code and train a model, because that can be automated. You can talk to ChatGPT and it can probably write code that's 90% correct, and you just have to tweak it a little bit. That, like, why would a company pay you $100,000 just to do that, right? Data scientists are creative minds, people with creative minds. You always need to understand that even it's similar businesses, like 2 different banks, they have very similar, right, business problems, right? You need to do risk management, you have to do marketing campaigns, you have to target people, propensity models, anomaly detection. But when you actually start to execute on it, the business rules and policies are very different. So even 2 different companies with the same problem, the way you approach that might be very different. They might be using different database structures, right? And the way they execute marketing campaigns, the way they talk to customers will be slightly different. That just changed the way you're going to engage, in this project. So it usually starts from the business pain points. Why are we going to even work on this project? And I'm hoping that you can think about these before you start to work on any projects. If you're doing exercises, that's fine. You just download a data set because you're learning the skills. But when you work on a project that you eventually want to use to convince a hiring manager that even though I don't have a data scientist experience, but I can get the work done, right? So you need to make sure that you think about these real life questions, right? When you start to build the project, it always starts from, why are we even working on this project? What is the business pain point? Or if you're, let's say you would like to work on a cargo project that's related to insurance industry, then how many machine learning use cases, that's applied in the insurance industry, right? Is it predicting if someone's going to file a claim, or predicting the claim amount, right? Or fraudulent, behaviors in insurance. There are a lot of things you can do. So you need to make sure that you do some research, you understand the industry, you understand the machine learning use cases in that industry first, and then you go backwards and think about, okay, so I would like to work on this insurance claim prediction problem, right? And you go find the data set, right? Now, that's the first step. Defining the business problem, define the scope, right? And then you have to know, like, what type of analysis you would like to do, right? After you find a data set, let's say. And there are different ways to approach these problems, right? So you have to think about it and maybe write a project proposal, because that's how it's done in real life. If you work in a smaller team, then maybe a formal proposal is not necessary. But if you work with a client, at least you need to do some sort of presentation just to help the client understand what's the plan, right? And you have to keep the business team engaged in this process because it's part of the education. So how do you build credibility over time? So in the end, after you have produced your machine learning models, people are willing to use it. And you can't just, stop talking to your clients for 3 months and they come back 3 months later and say, I have a very accurate model. It's very hard for you to convince people at that point. So from day one, you need to engage your client and sort of inform them every step, right, in the process. So that means you have to write a proposal. How do we translate that into your portfolio project building? Well, you need to write a project summary or project proposal, which is just 1 page. And that needs to be on your GitHub as well. On your GitHub, you definitely don't just want to show people 2 notebooks and that's it. And that's very boring. And it shows that you just do this as an exercise, right? And all of these will add up because that's how real life project works, right? You have a small proposal, And then what's the next step? Well, if you are just at the beginning stage of your data science learning journey, some of the things I talked about today maybe doesn't make sense, but I'm sure it will make sense later, right? I'm talking about the life cycle here, starting with a business problem, and you have to write a proposal. And then, of course, you start to work on the technical part of it, right? The implementation. So you're going to get data. So that's usually data collection, data extraction. And then you're going to do data cleaning, data preparation, visualization. You're going to do machine learning and stuff like that later, right? When you do data collection, for example, employers, if they look at your, your resume, they know, okay, you did this insurance project. Like in 1 second, I can tell, well, this is a Kaggle data set. So what's special about this project? There are 500 solutions out there on Kaggle. People share their notebooks. Does that give me the confidence that you can get the work done? Probably not, right? So can you add some element about data collection? Is there did you collect any data yourself? Right? Did you do any web scraping to collect data? Right? All of these will be very helpful. I hope just to help you get started thinking about these. Just downloading a data set from Kaggle and work on a challenge, it's not going to help you get a job. You need to do a lot more. Okay. So that will help you build up the experience, because in real life, you need to make a lot of small decisions when you work on the project, right? What kind of metrics are we going to use? What is the data set we're going to use, right? How much data cleaning we need to do, right? Do we need to build a small MVP project before we move on to the larger scope implementation, right? So just keep that in mind when you start to work on project. But again, coming back to this topic, when employers ask you, tell me about yourself, just to recap, there are two different ways they're going to ask you this. First of all, you're going to do the pitch, right? When you do the pitch, you want to tell people the important stuff, right? So you want to talk about your education, if it's relevant. You want to talk about skill set and experience. So usually what I would like to say is, and tell them that, hey, I have a master's in, whatever, computer science, or I have a master's in engineering background, right? And I currently work, for example, well, there are different scenarios, but if you work on some sort of real client project, or you have intern experience, then you will tell them that I, currently work as a data science intern at a certain company, right? And you can briefly tell them that you've implemented some projects, right? Because this is going to frame the conversation in the next 30 minutes, right? So you want to give them bits and pieces of important information. You'll tell them that this is my education background. I have some experience working on real life projects. If you don't have that, you tell them that if you actually don't have any real experience, you only have worked on portfolio projects, then I would start by saying that you just tell them I'm a career switcher. It's totally fine. Maybe the hiring manager's career switcher as well, right? Everyone deserves a chance, but you have to convince them that you can learn really fast, right? Most people will say, I learn really fast. Do you have proof, right? So usually what we tell students to do is, we'll tell them that I have, worked on 3 to 4 machine learning portfolio projects, right? I did this in a boot camp, and it sounds like this is your disadvantage, because you're telling people, okay, I graduated from boot camp. That means you don't have much experience, right? But you should tell people, always focus on the positive side, right? You tell people, look at what I've done in the past 3 months, right? I learned everything from Python to SQL to data science, machine learning, and I deliver. The results are the 4 projects I have completed. But you don't stop there. You say, I brought my portfolio today that I can show you, or I have that online. I have a blog post, right? I'm happy to share the screen and walk you through my projects. So, because you want to stay in control, you want to guide them through this. The interviewers, they have a list of questions, but if you have something interesting to tell, maybe they will just say, okay, you know what? Let's just spend more time hearing what this person is going to say, right? So that's why in the pitch, it's very important for you to tell them what you have. You tell them that, well, I'm a career switcher, and you want to convince them that I'm switching to data science because after my research, I really like it, right? And they have to find some some experiences and in the past that sort of can relate to that. Like I've always been interested in numbers or something like that, right? But the important message here is, in a matter of 6 months, let's say, I've completely transformed myself, learning coding, going through a lot of courses that requires a lot of discipline, right? And I've completed 45 projects, and I can show you today, right? So yeah, if you come from a irrelevant background, I guess that's one way you can show them, and sort of let them know that you can show them something today, and then you move on. But definitely don't spend 5 minutes on the self-intro. It's going to get people bored. They usually have questions. They would like to jump to the experience part. They would like to ask about the project you work on. So leave more time for that. And sometimes you have to just pause and listen and react to what people say. Yeah, so that sort of, explains, like, when you say that you are a fast learner, you have the proof, right? And then you move on, right? Definitely they will introduce the company. They will then want to ask you about the project, because now that you mentioned that you have worked on some projects, they will want to ask you the project, right? So the next question might be, so can you tell me about one of the projects you have worked on? Or some people will ask you, like, just tell me about one of the projects you're most proud of, right? And if they ask you the question this way, they want to know why you picked this project and why is this the project that you're most proud of, right? And you need to be prepared to answer that question, okay? And then you will move on to the projects. Again, the formula here is that when you introduce a project, you want to leave the impression that you're very, you're a good problem solver, right? You can independently solve problems and think about approach any kind of challenges. You don't need them to handhold you, right? And most likely you can learn really, really fast, okay? Or you have pretty decent skills. So that's something they would like to get out of this, because they just want to make sure that you can do the work. They don't want to train you, okay? Unless they just tell you this is junior job, you can come in, we provide training, but I don't think a lot of companies do that anymore. Only maybe the big companies. If you go work for a startup, you have to come in and just start contributing right away, right? So just keep that in mind. So when you explain the project to people, you have to sort of adopt this template and to tell them, even without them asking, you tell them, well, this is why I think this is the project I'm most proud of. It could be like, I'm a soccer fan, and that's why I scrape these, FIFA website to collect the data, and I would like to know something. I would like to do some really interesting analysis, right? That's a good motivation. It could be about sports. It could be about gaming, right? Anything. It could be about fishing. We have students who did a project about fishing because he loves fishing. And then he got a job from Nestle. And then the VP who, like, in the final round, loves fishing. And they hit it off and he got the job, right? I'm not saying that's the only reason that he's getting that job, but it's an interesting project, right? And it has really good intention, and it's just a good motivation. So you need to get prepared and tell people, this is why I picked this problem, because maybe I'm interested in the insurance industry. And and I did my research, right? I couldn't find a really good data set out there. That's why I'm still choosing this Kaggle project. But I've done a bunch of research. I understand, different use cases, right, of data science and insurance industry. And I picked this claims prediction, problem, and this is my approach, right? So this is probably how you get started with this, this introduction, and then give them the time, right, to ask you questions. Because when you work on, let's say, I use this certain machine learning or AI algorithms to do the prediction, they may want to ask you, why do you choose this algorithm over some other algorithms, right? So you just need to be prepared to do that. But people rarely ask you, tell me how logistic regression work, tell me how to solve this, equation. That's probably the worst interview question, because you can just call the packages. Let's just focus on getting the things done. So asking data related questions is even more interesting. Okay. All right, I'll take a look at some of your comments, and and then we'll move on. Okay. Okay. So question from Marianne. Can you give an example of portfolio project, please? Well, I guess I just sort of talked about it already. It could be, my suggestion is always starting from an industry problem. So pick an industry. So if you have a portfolio of projects, 3 to 4 of them, I would recommend, at least 2 problems or classification problems, which means you're doing some sort of supervised prediction. It could be predicting sentiment, right? It could be predicting customer churn for the telecommunication industry or whatever. And then pick one, regression problem. And then the 4th project should probably be either computer vision or natural language processing, just so you show that you have the ability to deal with unstructured data. You have to show the versatility, right? You can deal with structured data that fits into spreadsheet, pandas data frame, but you can also work with text data, for example. I mean, generative AI is so popular right now. So having some NLP background, or at least like the text processing, capability will be useful. But in terms of the topic, you can choose any topic. You just need to be able to reason why you pick that. So usually I would recommend going with something you're interested in or the industry you prefer, and do some research, find the use cases, right, that are applied in that industry, and then go find the data set. I'm pretty sure we'll find data set, right? The recording of the session, yes, it will be available on YouTube later. All right, cool. There's one question from Nigel. Can one appear overqualified? That's a good question. Yes, it happens many, many times. That's why sometimes when we work with students who have, let's say, PhD background, or they've done a lot of machine learning projects, but they are also open to apply for data analyst positions. When that happens, different scenarios. Let's say you have PhD background, and you mostly have academic background, let's say. You don't have any industry experience yet. In that case, the portfolio project is still one of the key things, right? Having a PhD on your resume, I think it's always adding value. And there's no way you can hide that, right? But you don't really need to highlight the things like, publications and stuff if it's not related, right? But still focus on data processing skills. One of the, I think, small fear people have, hiring, let's say, someone who has years of academic background is, can you actually work with the commercial tools or open source tools such as pandas and SQL, even writing SQL queries to process data? It doesn't require PhD, but are you willing to do that? Can you do that really well? Because that's absolutely necessary for anyone to become a good data scientist, right? Regardless of the education background. So in that case, you just need to show the relevant skills that are important for the job, such as SQL, Python, data processing. And when it comes to machine learning, I think because you have advanced degrees, it's always going to be your advantage. You might be able to do things better, right? Now, if you are, but I would definitely hide the, some of the publications and stuff, like try to minimize that, right? You don't want it to look like a CV, which is more academic, right? For someone who has strong, a common mistakes people make when they use their data science resume to apply for BI and data analytics jobs, is that they're applying for a job that requires SQL, Python, Power BI, Tableau. All of their portfolio projects are machine learning. Then you're not going to get interviews, because this happened many times. We refer students to companies, right? Student have computer science background, worked on robotics and stuff, interesting portfolio project. They're applying for a job that that requires time series forecasting, which is using more of the traditional statistical methods, right? And then they didn't even get interviews, even though the hiring managers used to work for me, because he said, well, I think you overqualify, or sometimes they just don't think you're the right fit, because he said, well, we're doing time series forecasting. It's not that exciting. And I don't think he will be very excited about the job. So maybe in 6 months he will definitely leave. That kind of makes sense to me from a student, job seeker's perspective. They just want a job right away, and they want to get started. But I'm sure, like, because I've seen the pattern, students will move on to the next job really quickly because they do have in-demand skills. So as soon as you have 6 months of experience, recruiters will start calling you. You'll move on to the next job, which also makes 100% sense. And that's why when I say companies are looking for the right fit, sometimes overfitting is a problem. It's not necessarily meaning that you have a PhD, then you overqualify. It's more about, like, okay, your experience is more like machine learning, advanced analytics, but this job requires someone who has really strong attention to detail, who can manipulate data really well, who can write SQL queries, and who can visualize data. But unfortunately, that doesn't require machine learning. So you have to, your skill set is not useful for this job, even though I know you can do it. I just don't think you're going to stay very long on this job. That's going to hurt you. So the good thing about data science is that if you learn data science, then you pick up data analytics skills along the way. You can always apply for data analyst jobs as well, right? In a tough job market, I don't think you need to be very picky. Maybe if you have a data analyst position that requires you to use Python visualization, maybe you should, many people will take that job, right? Even though the original goal is data science or machine learning. So I tell students to say, let's remove this all of the machine learning projects. She was like, what? That I spent months on this, I don't want to remove them. But I said, you're not going to get interviews. So recommendation here is that when you work on your data science project, you will definitely need to have some data visual, like at least one data visualization project using Power BI, using Tableau, whatever visualization tool, right? And you need to do a lot of analytics. So when you do machine learning project, you're going to spend a lot of time exploring and understanding the data, right? So the first half of your data science machine learning project can be used as a project for applying for data analyst jobs. And you need to add more business sense to it, because data analytics is mainly about, having the business sense, and the tools are not the most important part. Like practice makes perfect. Everyone can get good at SQL in a couple of months, but it's more about understanding the metrics, the business, right? So try to pick projects that are more business friendly. You can work on, of course, computer vision, more challenging projects, but it's most of the data analytics projects not computer vision related. So you should have the right balance in your portfolio, right? That would be my recommendation. Okay. How do you address a long gap in your resume? Yeah, so just don't put the years. So that's what I would recommend. So first of all, I think people understand that you're a career switcher, because when I look at your resume, I can tell right away, this is a career switcher. So I will adjust my expectation as a hiring manager, because I still know what I'm looking for. As long as you hit those, I'm going to interview you, right? So you have a gap, that's totally okay. But you don't want to make that so obvious, right? Like if you put the years and stuff, and then people can see 5 years gap, that's going to give you some disadvantage. You can justify that. You can always explain to people that why would you want to do that? Because you think that people are always going to ask you about the gap. Maybe it only happens 30% of the time, but that means 70% of the time people wouldn't even notice that, because they're still focusing on what you have done, what you're capable of doing, right? Because I know you're a career switcher, then just tell me like what you can do. Can you actually do this work? So everything you say and everything you prepare is for that interview, right? So it needs to be relevant for, in that context. Okay, anything that's not relevant, you should remove them. So if there's a gap, remove it. Don't show that. And there are smart employers who will notice that, and they'll ask you. Then you have your prepared answer. You can always, you can always address that. If they don't like it, then there's not much you can do. I mean, just move on. There are companies that don't care. Trust me, there are lots of companies that don't care about the gaps, because, most of a lot of students coming to boot camps, they have gaps, or they don't have their career switchers. So people sort of all have similar challenges, and people all end up getting jobs. So that's not a big issue. Okay. I just started a data science bachelor's degree. What do you advise as a parallel development in the field? If you started the bachelor in data science, then I think the program is going to cover most of the things you need to do data science. I would recommend doing a minor or just do self-learning on just do more computer science. That's going to help you because data science is getting more specialized. So if you are a data scientist or data analyst that happen to know more about software engineering or know more about data engineering, it's going to help you a lot, right? Even though the job is still data science, but it's going to help you with your career, and you're going to be a better problem solver in general, because sometimes there are things that data scientists cannot do because they're not familiar with cloud. They're not familiar with, Linux, Docker, or, how to deploy things in production and things like that. So you definitely would like to learn more about those. Pick up one cloud platform, maybe AWS or Azure. And then of course, you need to find your specialization in data science as well, whether it's natural language processing or computer vision. You sort of have to find that area that you would like to focus on. Okay. All right. I'll come back to the questions later, but let's move on because we're reverse engineering this, right? So, again, first question is tell me about your experience. So we know that it's either portfolio building or you find some opportunities to work on real life projects, or if you can find freelance opportunity, that's also really good. Okay. Remove the non-relevant experience. If you only have one page, you would like to minimize that, and you would like to highlight the portfolio projects. Okay. Education, always leave that at the bottom. One recommendation is don't list all the coursework you did on Coursera. It's not necessary. If you have 10 certifications, maybe show just 2 of them. You don't want to leave the impression that you've done a ton of courses. You don't know how people are going to interpret that. For example, you've taken a lot of courses. I know, I get it, right? You're just telling me that you're a career switcher. Then, I know you did Apache Spark. I know you learned AWS, right? I know you did this and that. Great. Now show me the experience. And I'm still going to go to the experience part and see, have you applied these skill set? Have you applied these, whatever skills you've learned in these certifications in a real project, even if it's a portfolio project? If you have not applied those, then the certification means nothing to me, right? That only tells me that you like to do a lot of courses, but you never apply them. It's actually negative to me. So you don't want to show everything. I know, like, you actually need to take a lot of courses, right, to become more skilled. But on the resume, don't show that many courses. Right? It's just like when you graduate from Masters of Statistics or Computer Science program, you don't want to list like the stats course you've taken, because I know, like, you've done these courses. So it's not adding value. Okay, you'd rather save some space for the portfolio projects. Okay. All right. The next question, the important question would be, why should we hire you? So I would like to hear your comments and feedback on this. How would you approach this question? Why do you think you're the best candidate? Why should we hire you? How would you answer this kind of questions? And every interview you go to, you have to nail this question, right? It's all about why are you the best candidate? And you need to convince them, right? Yep. Highlight how you're different from other candidates. Values, skills, teamwork. Yep, these are useful. Let me put it down here. Skills, you have teamwork. Okay. To show that you're different. All right. The question is how, right? Well, of course, you need preparation. Oh, there's another comment. I think a lot of it is demonstrating skills that have been listed on the position, maybe not everything, but demonstrating through specific experiences why you have the relevant skills. Yeah, thanks, Robert. I can tell you have a lot of good experience. Maybe you're hiring manager yourself. But yeah, I think it's right on. The way you answer this question is not about yourself. So please keep in mind, it's never about yourself. It's about like the value you can add to the team. So try to be a good listener during the interviews. You have to know what type of team is this? Why are they hiring someone? What is the background of the hiring director or hiring manager? Was the previous team member just left? Or this is a new team and he's the first, because sometimes like you're the first data scientist they're hiring, and they hired a director of data science team. He's starting a new team. That sort of give you more context, and you understand why this person is hiring. And that tells you what type of people they're looking for. I'll give you one example. If you know that you're probably the early employees in the data science team, and this is a traditional business, for example, that means they're looking for someone who, who's not only technical, but also is a very good communicator, because the head of data science or whatever need to socialize a lot to prove the value of the existence of the data science team. People are doing things in a very traditional way. You have to do a lot of education, right? Tell people about the value even before you have a machine learning models or the first dashboard in place. You have to understand people's needs, pain points, right? So if that's the case, your answer needs to be sort of related to that, okay? It's almost like, yeah, hire me and I can take care of your, take care of like, all the pain points here, right? I can help you sort of communicate with, internal clients, right? I can dig in, talk to IT and find all the relevant data sets, right? Like that's very different from an established team where you just join, everything is ready, and they need your skill set to fine tune the models. And you don't have to do a ton of communications in that case, right? So you have to understand like what's the pain points, not just of the company, but of this hiring manager. Like what are they looking for, right? So in the self-introduction, in the introduction, right? Or sometimes you get to ask questions early, so you turn that into a conversation, but you sort of need to pick up those cues, right? And you need to have a set of answers depending on the scenario, okay? If that's the case, that's how you're gonna answer, right? Or if sometimes they tell you they're looking for someone who's junior, then right away you need to prove to them that like you can learn really, really fast. And you have proof. My boot camp experience, it might be showing some weaknesses because it looks like you're new, but you can also turn that into your advantage because you tell people how fast you can learn, right? And sometimes it's established teams, then I bet you they're going to ask you more technical questions because they have seen a ton of people. They have like a team of 5, 10, 20 data scientists already. So the question is more about, do you know specific skills? Do you know specific algorithms? How would you approach specific problems, right? But anyways, I think you need to understand that it's not just about yourself. Put yourself in the shoe of the hiring manager. Sometimes it's hard. How do you even know? How do you even tell? Well, read the job description really carefully, right? When you talk to the hiring HR, ask them a lot of questions. Like, how big is the team? Ask about the background of the hiring managers or whatever, right? What kind of tools they use. Well, HR is not technical. They won't be able to answer all of your questions, but you'll be able to find a lot of useful information, okay? It never hurts to ask. The worst case is tell you, well, I can't tell you right now. But a lot of times people will tell you, right? And then go to LinkedIn, check out the team, right, their profiles, and it will tell you. And even like, when did this hiring manager start working at this company? If it's 1 month ago, or if it's 10 years ago, it's very different, right? Okay. And then in a job description, you'll find that maybe they're looking for someone who's more experienced about specific techniques or skills, right? Then maybe you should highlight that. But sometimes you notice that this is a team that's more like an internal consulting team, supporting many different lines of businesses. That means communication skills very important, right? And you need to sort of list that as one of your strengths, okay? I don't think we'll have time to go through all of these. It's not an interview session. I just want to tell you that, you know, you need to think about these early on. You don't think about this kind of question before your interview, right? Even before you start learning data science, I think you sort of need to know what to expect. And along the way, when you start building your portfolio, you keep thinking about these questions, right? All right. Okay, so I think we only have time to go through 2 of these, but these are the 2 most important questions. First is, well, the first one should be like, do you even have the technical skills? But that's usually the first round, right? You have to pass the technical interview. And there's no sort of getting around. You have to, sometimes for some companies, you have to do the lead code, but for some other companies like startups and stuff, like you just have to do the HackerRank or SQL, Python to make sure that you can pass those tests, right? When you're in interviews, then you definitely have to explain your experience. Why should someone hire you? And these are the 2 most important things. And all the effort you've done, you know, building portfolio, taking courses, and your past work experience, they sort of all, you know, help you answer these questions, and you have to really prepare for this, okay? All right. I think we talked about resume a little bit already, right? So going backwards, how do you even get to the point where you get, you know, the interview stage, right? You need to have a killer resume, and that resume needs to be very relevant. So first of all, I think on a, you know, relevant resume, you have to have the right skills. You need to have the right skills. I highly recommend you, if you're at the beginning stage of your learning journey, you really have to read the job descriptions, you know, do some research, right? Pick a few industries or companies you're interested, go through at least 10 job descriptions so you understand what companies are looking for in this industry. You need to know the right skills. And of course, I will tell you what to learn today, but you need to make sure that you apply those skills, right? I've seen, you know, people listing like more than 30 hard skills in the skill set section. And sometimes I get a little bit annoyed by that because I just don't see the relevant experience. Like someone mentioned that they know NoSQL database, but I just don't find anywhere that this person have worked with NoSQL database in the past. So that tells me that, well, you are just adding that as a keyword, or maybe you did a course on that. That's great, right, from your perspective, but that's not what I'm looking for, right? So just keep that in mind, and we'll talk about the skills and things you need to learn later. Okay. When it comes to resume, structure is really important. And just briefly, we have a resume and interview workshops. So we'll post that to our meetup groups or Discord. So we'll talk about that in more detail later. But I think typically people will have summary of qualification, and they'll have skill set, skills, experience, and sometimes will separate, have a separate, let's say, personal projects, right? And then education, right? I would probably just group, certifications and education into one section, but it's personal preference. Okay, my suggestion. Oh, and there's also there's the contact information, right? Summary of qualification. So here's my suggestion for contact information. Having LinkedIn will be useful. Make sure that it's clickable, right? You should definitely add GitHub, and if you have blogs, you need to add that information. Okay. I think that's straightforward. So you have like, links to GitHub, but I'll tell you that you need this, link in a few places. Okay. Summary of qualification, I don't think you need it. That would be my recommendation. Assumption here is that you have one page, which is usually more effective if you're a career switcher. Okay. Skill set, turn that into different sections, right? So you have, let's say, programming, you have data analytics and visualization, for example. You'll have like machine learning, okay? And if you know other like big data engineering or cloud, you can just create a few different, sections to make it easy for people to read. If you have, and sometimes I see skill set that are pretty random. They'll mention AWS, and then they jump to Tableau, and then the next keyword will be like machine learning. So like you want to make it well organized, right? Because when you say you have attention to detail, I'm sort of expecting that your resume would like have a nice template, everything's well organized, right? But if it's very messy and then the template is like kind of bad, then even if you say that you have good attention to detail, I wouldn't believe that, right? That's why you don't need the summary of qualifications or attention to details. You have good time management. But if you run late to the interview, then just don't say that you have good time management skill, right? So it's not really relevant. I'm hoping to see some examples. So that's why experience is really important, okay? But we talked about experience already. Personal project, the way you structure that, sometimes you can just put that under experience, right? Because if, let's say, you worked as a bank teller, right, for a couple of years, and if you list that on the top, it's not going to help you. So in that case, if you absolutely don't have anything relevant, then just put your personal, project experience under experience. You don't have to call that work experience. It's not really work experience, but you just call that experience. You're telling me that this is your data science related experience, right? It's just how you word it. I think some people call that personal projects or side projects, but in this case, I'll just call that experience. Because I do think, right, the skill set and whatever, that translates into real life experience as well, but then you have to show people, right? So that's why you structure the projects, just like how real projects work, as I said at the beginning, right? What is the business pain point? Some people say, okay, this is not a real business setting. I don't know how to answer this question, but remember I told you, like, you need to pick an industry first. So you can say something about it just to let people know what is the problem, what are you trying to solve, right? And then you start to talk, well, after business, we just start to talk about the data. Is there a data collection process, right? Did you scrape the data yourself? Did you clean the data? Those will be useful, right? Have you done any analytics, visualization, exploratory data analysis? And then you move on to like, things like machine learning and stuff, right? But what is the outcome, right? What's the value of the project? Not every project you can sort of communicate that clearly. But my recommendation is pick a project where you can actually tell that this project has some value, as if it was applied in industry, right? But when people see this kind of structure, they can relate to it, because that's how you do real life projects, right? Then they sort of know that, okay, you understand the process. So it's less time for me to coach you, right? And that's important, okay? Because 90% of the time when I review people's resume, like people jump to like machine learning right away. Like they're so eager to show people that they know machine learning, right? It's all technical, it's like, I use this algorithm and I use this, hyperparameter tuning, and it did this and that, like this is the accuracy. After seeing this like many times, I just get tired of it. Like, okay, what's the point? What's the value, right? Is there anything that's different? Because I think Robert said you need to show the differentiator, right? What's the differentiation here? So the difference is probably in the way you even structure your resume that matters, right? So try to follow this, okay? Well, that's my recommendation on the resume. Let me see if you have any questions, okay? Should I put additional skills after education? No. If you have a skill set section on the top and just put all the skills there, you don't need any additional skills. And if it's the additional skills are not really relevant to the job, then you might as well just remove it, right? People always want to add more things, but writing resume is really about just removing things so that the relevant stuff stand out, okay? Um, 6-second resume. Yeah, usually I think you don't spend that much time on a resume, right? You just, skim through the resume and if it's interesting, I'll spend more time on it for sure. But if it's not interesting, I'll just skip. And sometimes, like when I review resumes, I know like, well, this person might be interesting, but then I feel like, should I spend more time on it, or most of the time I think that, okay, there are 50 other resumes out there, maybe I'll just move on. I could have made a mistake by skipping this one, but you never know. So I would probably prefer to move on and see if there are other interesting candidates. So yeah, I would agree, like people don't spend that much time on a resume unless they find something interesting. What technologies are trending and good to be relevant in Canada? Microsoft ecosystem, Power BI, Power Automate, or Google ecosystem. From a data analyst standpoint, just from a cloud perspective, we actually have a job market report that we're going to release. It was supposed to be in June. It got delayed, but in July, we'll definitely have it, and we'll share that with everyone. It will be on our blog post as well. So as far as I know, when I look at the numbers, we scraped thousands and thousands of jobs. We did analysis on that. AWS is more popular in the US from a data science perspective, and Azure, or some people say Azure, is more popular in Canada, more popular than AWS. But I guess it's, it all depends on the industry, especially in, if you're in Canada, in Toronto area, there's so many banks. We've pretty much trained all the banks. We know that, for example, RBC uses AWS. We've done training to Bank of Montreal, their data science team, it's AWS, right? But Scotiabank will be using Google Cloud. TD will be using Azure. And retailers are more likely to use GCP because they consider AWS as a competitor, because they're in essential retail as well. They're in e-commerce. But just from a data analytics standpoint, Power BI is getting popular. In the past, it's all about Tableau, but Power BI is indeed catching up really, really quickly. And it is powerful when it comes to data manipulation. So the data handling, data modeling capability is stronger than Tableau, and also they make it free, even though eventually you don't pay less, because the desktop version is free, but in an enterprise environment, you sort of have to have the license to even read the dashboard. So yeah, but Power BI is really good skill set to have if you would like to. But I would say the tool itself is not the most important thing. It's more about, do you understand data modeling, how to structure the data for analytics, and then do you know how to query those data, right? So you have to structure the data efficiently, and then you have to query this, the data efficiently, and then you need to be able to visualize the data efficiently. So those three type of questions. But yeah, Power BI is something I would recommend. Python is getting more trending for data analytics jobs as well, even though still a lot of companies use SAS, they use Excel. But SQL is absolutely the most important thing. for any data analytics job. So SQL, Power BI, Tableau. But there are things like Looker, and there are also the open source ones, but not as popular as Power BI and Tableau. Should we put any non-relevant job experience if we are a career switcher or we are fresh off the college candidates? Non-relevant job experience if we're, yeah, I guess I answered this already. Non-relevant job is fine. I know you are a career switcher, so if there are experiences from the past that translate or transfer to the current job you're applying for, I would recommend putting that. So if in the past you've been working with numbers, you want to highlight that, even though it's not a data analyst or data scientist job. I found that the data science field has been so focused on the technical side in the past few years. You need to know big data, you have to know all kinds of packages and machine learning and stuff. Sometimes people know how to build machine learning, but when it comes to some really simple numbers question, they're just not good at it because they don't have the business intuition. There are a lot of people who are technically very capable, but they just can't become a very good data analyst. Like there are a lot of data scientists who are just not good at data analytics in general, because the way they got trained is that they focus on machine learning, but machine learning is not the only thing, in real life analytics. It's about like reading at the reports and finding problems in the report, in the dashboard. That requires really strong data intuition. That's why executives are all really good at data, even though they don't program, but they can find like problems in your chart really, really quickly because they understand the business. They understand. So, and that is like harder to train because you can teach people to program really quickly, but the business side or the intuition part sometimes is hard. But you want to make sure that if you have worked with numbers in the past, even using Excel, you want to highlight that, right? But you don't want to list Excel as your key skills in the skills section because it's just a default for a data science job. You don't want to highlight that. So remove anything Microsoft related, like Excel, PowerPoint. You're supposed to know that. It's not really something you want to highlight. Okay. What do you think feel about including research papers that are tangential to ML in a resume? I included my neuroscience papers, which make my resume 1.25 pages. I think that's fine, but it really depends on the companies you apply for and the jobs you apply for. I can tell you, for example, for RBC, well, I'm not sure if you're in the US or in Canada, but if you apply for a job at RBC in the DNA team, they would prefer PhDs because in the past, they rejected one of our students who graduated from Masters of Statistics, and the student knows machine learning really well, did well in the test, the quizzes and interviews, and in the end, they still prefer hiring PhDs. But the team culture can change rapidly as well. I was just saying that for jobs that are more specialized in machine learning, this is absolutely adding value. Because if you look at the market, right, it's all about supply and demand. There are maybe 90% of the data science job seekers out there, they don't come from PhD background. So they can apply for jobs that are not that specialized in machine learning, right? So for those 10% of the time, that is your advantage because their companies will definitely prefer advanced degree. And if you want to become really solid machine learning scientist, you need to be able to do literature review. You need to know how the state of art work, right? And that is adding tremendous value. But when you use that to apply for a general data science job, or data analyst position, then you don't want to include that. Okay, you're gonna miss some opportunities because they're always, but I think, in this case, you better off just keep it in one page and remove the publications or, okay. Vikram, I'm not saying that you shouldn't put dates. It's just like when you have a huge, gap, right? It's just like you remove your experience sometimes. irrelevant experience. It's not really lying about anything. You're really just trying to focus your resume on the relevant stuff. But even after putting all of your experience, you feel like you still don't have enough space, then I wouldn't mind adding the past experience. But I'm pretty sure, one page, you can add all the projects there. Sorry, I answered the wrong question. So for education and past jobs, so for education, sometimes, if you, let's say, you worked in as a, entrepreneur, or you did something totally irrelevant and your education was like 20 years ago, you did a master's, right? But it's not up to date anymore. You might as well just remove that. You never know, because people will be biased, right? Because of the age or whatever. So in that case, removing the year is okay, because that gets you the interview. And during the interview, if people have age bias, sometimes this is something you cannot control. But you know what? Just go to the interview and let people decide, because you will impress them with other things. And I'm not saying that age is not always going to be your disadvantage, because I think data analytics in general, it's not like some other fields. You actually get more valuable as you as you start to accumulate more industry experience. So I've seen a ton of analytics professionals who had many years of experience in the past, and they do career switch successfully. So that's totally okay. Yeah. All right. So I think we need to move on. So let's keep going. I'll come back to the questions, right? So we talked about the interviews, and we talked about the resumes, and now you know that you need to build the experience, you need to build the skill set, right? Well, so the next step is, we got to do some preparation, right? So learn data science, right? So when it comes to learning data science, there are a few things you need to do in your journey. You have to do projects, right? Work on hands-on projects, or let's say portfolio projects, okay? But you need to have the skills in order to work on the project. So you have to sort of learn the skills. So my recommendation is really just follow a structured learning path, right? So now I'm going to talk about learning path. That's very important, but it's actually not that sophisticated. You've probably seen that many times, right? You need to start with SQL and Python. So coding is very important skill to have. Even if ChatGPT can help you write some code, but you need to be able to interpret the code and find bugs and fix the bugs. So it's very important. It doesn't mean you don't have to code, right? And I can tell you that generative AI is actually going to create more jobs, or at least I don't think the job number will decrease, because you don't know how many, for example, a lot of people say that ChatGPT will replace, developers and software engineers. But you have to understand that there's 10 applications the company wants to build, and they only have the budget to work on one, because they can only afford 2 developers. But they have 10 ideas they would like to implement. So the tooling might, Copilot and stuff will make developers more scalable and more efficient. But finally, there's so many ideas they would like to implement. This actually is going to increase the demand. And right now, in generative AI, it's creating a lot of jobs, because companies will say, if executives will say, oh, I want this, I want that. Can we build this? Can we customize on our own data set? Can we build our own chatbot? Can we throw all of our internal knowledge, to a generative AI engine to build a knowledge base and things like that? So previously, people don't even think that they can do that themselves, or they think it's going to cost them a fortune. But now everybody would like to at least give it a try, and there's a huge demand, right? So from a programming perspective, SQL and Python, and then of course you need to know data science, or in this case, I would group data analytics and data science into one category, and then we have more specialized machine learning, and then big data. So I think these are some of the things a data scientist will need to know. But you should prioritize your time, right? So to begin with, you have to learn SQL and Python. I would usually recommend someone starting from SQL first and then move on to Python. Because SQL is relatively easier to learn, but it doesn't mean it's easier to become really good at SQL, compared to Python. It's just different, but it's easier to start with, and it helps you to build up the confidence, and then you move on to Python program for absolute beginners, right? But if you've learned Python in the past, then it's a different story. Data science and analytics is more about, right, data munging, or your ability to work with data, right? So, for example, data collection. Do you know how to scrape data and collect data? Sometimes it's useful, even for data scientists. Or if the data is in the database, can you use SQL to do data extraction? And now that you have extracted data, do you know how to do data preparation, right? But that includes things like, merge data, join data, do aggregation, and things like that, okay? And data exploration, understanding the basic distribution, right? Okay, if the data has outliers and things like that. And of course, you want to do data visualization as well. It turns out to be a lot of things you need to learn. But the good thing about Python is that it's really just a different library you need to work with. It's not like you're learning, it's just learn new packages, but it's not that overwhelming, okay? And then of course, you need to know statistics, right? So there's the math side of things. I'll put that under machine learning because, it's more about applying statistics and optimization for machine learning. But there's the basic statistical analysis. For data science. Okay. Such as, understanding the distribution of the data by hypothesis or statistical testing, things like A/B testing. Those are very useful. A lot of data scientists working for big tech companies, such as Meta, they don't necessarily train machine learning models, but if they work on the product analytics side, then absolutely they have to do A/B testing. They have to understand which feature or which variation of the feature works better, right? So you have to do a lot of hypothesis testing. Yeah, and then some sort of like regression analyses and time series and things like that. I would group them under statistical analysis, and machine learning is just a branch of it, which is more modern way of saying statistical analyses. But this is where you're going to learn all the machine learning techniques, right? There's a whole library of algorithm you need to know, but a lot of people think that when it comes to machine learning, it's just the algorithms. It's not. The algorithms, some people have fear about math, right? Because you need to learn a lot of algorithms, such as unsupervised. There's supervised learning, right? There's like dimension reduction and things like that. But there's clustering, dimension reduction, supervised. There will be regression analysis, linear regression, nonlinear regression, or classification, right? Under classification, then you have a bunch of machine learning algorithms such as decision trees, right? Logistic regression, more advanced ensemble models such as random forest, and there's XGBoost, LightGBM, whole bunch of algorithms, right? A lot of people think that the important part about machine learning is just the algorithms, but I think differently. I think these are just algorithms, which eventually will just become like, libraries or APIs you're going to work with. For example, PyTorch, right? The most popular ones are scikit-learn, right? Things like that. You're just calling these libraries. The algorithms have been implemented in those libraries. So you are not the one like writing the algorithms. We're really just using the packages written by the community, by other people, right? So applying these libraries is actually the important part. And applying machine learning is, and of course you need to understand algorithm, but you need to understand the workflow, right? And that's the life cycle of machine learning, which means, well, um, we're coming back to the data again. Do you know how to prepare data for machine learning? Because it's not really preparing data for BI and Power BI or visualization anymore. It's like doing feature engineering, getting the right data for your machine learning problem, right? So you need to sort of be able to manipulate data, right? Preparing features, pre-processing, feature engineering. Let's say feature processing, there will be pre-process your features, right? Feature engineering, okay? And also feature selection. If that doesn't ring a bell, don't worry. You're going to learn that along the way. I just want you to know that a lot of people think that machine learning, algorithm is the most important part. But once actually you know how the algorithm work, calling the API is probably just like 3, 4, 5 lines of code. So what makes it a good machine learning model is actually the workflow. It's the data you prepare that goes into the algorithm. The algorithms are always the same. Most of the time, people are using the same algorithms, right? There's no magic there. The patterns, the workflows that you can follow, okay? But the data, that's why it's called data science. Data is also very, very important, right? It's not just the machine learning or the algorithm part, okay? But I don't want to mislead you. Algorithms are important. Like why we're having these breakthroughs is all like, advanced algorithms. But most of the practical machine learning and data science, you're going to just use existing libraries. It's more about just getting the data right. And once you have the model, right? Let's say you have model training and you have model tuning. Now, one of the mistakes people make on their resume is that when they describe a project, it feels like it's all about model training and tuning, right? But as I said, you need to sort of talk about how you prepare data, how you do the feature engineering. Those are important too. But also, it's very important to interpretation, right? You need to understand how to explain your models in layman's term, to the business. That's very important. A lot of machine learning data science projects fail because the business doesn't understand your model, and then they don't know how to implement that, or they just don't have the confidence because the way you interpret the results don't give them the confidence, right? So interpretation is very important, and it's not always about using the machine learning tools to interpret the model, because sometimes like the students will say, okay, I'm going to give my notebook to the client, but they don't have Jupyter Notebook installed on their laptop. How do you expect them to open that, right? The business users, they all use Excel. And that's why I found myself using Excel a lot when I work as a data scientist, because you have to sort of save the output, whatever interpretation. If you have some sort of visualization, you just do that in Excel. And that's why Excel is still very important skill set to have. Nothing fancy, but you sometimes need to be comfortable with just creating a pivot table. And sometimes you just need to be able to do some visualization and create some sort of tables to profile your models, right? So that includes the model profiling, okay? These are technical stuff. You'll learn that later, but just keep this in mind that it's not always about the algorithms. It's how you prepare the data that goes into the algorithm. And also once you have the outcome from the modeling process, how you're going to interpret the results, okay? And you need to get pretty comfortable with presentation, like, basically just PowerPoints or Google Slides or whatever tool you use. That's important too, okay? So this is like, applied machine learning or data science. These are some of the things you need to know. Again, coming back to the important questions, you're going to write resume and you're trying to answer questions like, why should we hire you? Tell us about your experience and experiences in this process. And you have to show them that you have experience working, you need to cover all the points basically, So talk to data scientists and ask them how they actually spend their time on data science projects, right? How much time they spend on data preparation. What are some of the challenges? And then you would like to sort of borrow that and put that on your resume, right? And that shows experience. Okay. I listed big data here because at WeCloud Data, we have an applied big data course, right? It's not the most popular course because a lot of data scientists or career switchers, they feel like the big data course is kind of technical. Now, this is the way I look at this. Nowadays, there's just not enough, like you don't have a lot of extra things that you can show employers that you have an advantage over other candidates, right? But I can tell you, I've reviewed so many resumes. Most people will have machine learning experience. Most people will have data science experience because they're right. All of these are taught in school, in courses. People know SQL and Python. Then what makes you different? Right? Listing these keywords don't make you different. Showing a project, doing model training, it doesn't make you different, right? But what's different is the way you tell the story. And that's why you need to have a structure. When you work on the project, you need to follow the right structure to work on the project, the right workflow. And then when you explain them on resume and interviews, you have to follow a structure. And that's why you want to remove all the noises, because you want people to see that structure, the storytelling part, right? But another way that you can sort of differentiate is actually more skills, right? So that's why I think big data skills are important in certain ways. I think this is nice to have, right? Job search is a pretty daunting process. You have to learn so many things. So you don't always have the time and resource and energy to learn extra things. So that's why I say it's nice to have. But it's necessary because a lot of companies, they just don't use, they use Python, but their data is really big. So you can't really run Python on a MacBook, on a server somewhere. It's just not a good practice, right? You don't want your employees or data scientists to download the company's data to their company laptop and everyone keep a different copy of it and they can modify that. You know, the reason why people use GitHub is because you want to do team collaboration, right? You don't want people to have their own code and it's very hard to manage. Same with data. So that's why data usually should live on a server somewhere, everyone share access to those servers, right? But when you have really large data, well, that's one of the advantages of SQL over Python, because SQL, usually data is stored in the data warehouse. It is more powerful server that allows more people to use that concurrently, right? So downloading data set to a Python environment is not the best practice unless your company just deal with very tiny data or it's a very small team. So it's okay. You're the only data scientist and everything lives on your laptop and then you have to put insurance on that laptop in case it crashes, you know. But I think knowing how to handle big data is a very good skill to have. So companies usually work with big data, right? So you need to know how to handle big data. Usually that's required for senior data scientist job, right? For example, but if the company has really massive data from day one, you probably need to learn those. The reason why I say it's nice to have is because the tools have made these big data stuff like easier to work with and easier to learn. It's not like, 10 years ago, 8 years ago when I used to work with big data and you have to write Java code, right, to do MapReduce and stuff. It's a lot more easier to work with now. So as long as you're good with Python, then Spark is not that hard to learn, to program, right? But of course, understanding the technology, distributed systems, and Apache Spark under the hood is going to take time, but it's not really required for a data scientist anyways to be expert in Spark, but you need to be expert in like working with this data framing Spark, for example, right? So I think it's a necessary skill. Another skill, so I think earlier someone asked me about like having a bachelor's degree, going through bachelor's of data science. So my recommendation here is learn more about not just the big data, right? Cloud computing. So work with AWS, or maybe Azure and GCP, just pick one of them, right? but you don't need to be so not trying to become a cloud engineer, right? That's the goal. So when you learn cloud, you're opening a can of worms. There's so many things you can learn. And a lot of people ask me, should I go with the cloud engineering certification? I said, no, because you don't need that for a data scientist job, but you need to be comfortable working with tools in the cloud, right? So the bare minimum is that if your data set is really big, it doesn't work on your laptop, then you have to work with a cloud instance. That means you need to understand how to work with SSH, to log into a remote server, some of those basic engineering skills, right? Working with the command line, working with SSH to connect to a server. Those are not hard to learn at all, but you just need to spend the time to learn and practice and just get familiar with it. It's way easier than like machine learning, data science, and there's no math involved. But you just need to have that general knowledge and experience, right? And then a little bit data engineering. I sort of just group all of these under big data, but it's big data things like using Apache Spark, right, to analyze big data, for example, setting up a server, data engineering. But you can go like more advanced, like talk about things like MLOps, but it's out of the scope because this is still just a data scientist job. But it's already a very overwhelming list of things you need to learn, right? I actually have a data fundamental course I'm teaching like Python tomorrow, so I'm doing some preparation. I'm going to share this with you, but I'm still writing the code on this. But if you look at the general capability of Python, right, there are a lot of things it can do. But just for data science, I think there are a few things you need to know. For example, data manipulation, right? There are certain packages you need to know, such as pandas. I listed a lot of cutting edge tools here. It doesn't mean that you need to know everything. Knowing pandas is good enough, but I'm just telling you that in the industry, right? There's polars. The logo is a polar bear, but it's more advanced version of pandas. It's coming. It's written in a language called Rust, which is going to be the future of programming languages. I heavily believe in that, right? And so polars is written in Rust, but it has a good Python API. So everyone's catering to the Python community, right? Even if it's written in C++, Rust, but people know that the vast majority of data engineers, data scientists, they use Python. So it's like pandas on steroids. It's way faster, right? But it doesn't mean pandas, you should like stop using pandas, because pandas are going to stay here forever. It's one of the most complete data manipulation libraries. It's always going to be here. Just so you know, there are efforts to make pandas run faster, and some of these projects are built differently. Their APIs are even the same as pandas because they know, data scientists all know pandas, right? So there are Dasks and there's molding and there are different libraries that you can pay attention to, but just need to focus on pandas. So I'll need to change the color of that box so you know the difference of what to focus on, right? So that's data manipulation and then data visualization. Again, there are a ton of libraries out there. You don't have to master all of them. What's more important is like you understand there are 10 different types of visualization, like plots you need to know. And then it's just a matter of like Googling Stack Overflow, talking to ChatGPT and figure out how to plot that. Because the generated plot is what matters. But whether it's like 3 lines or 10 lines, you can use whatever method. But I just care about the plot, right? So you just need to be able to produce the plot, but you can use Matplotlib, you can use Panel, you can use Seaborn, different libraries, okay? But always start from Matplotlib because it's just sort of like built in. It always comes with pandas, and pandas use Matplotlib as the backend for visualization as well. And then you can learn, I guess, one of these, whether it's Seaborn or Plotly. Plotly is pretty cool as well. But most of the time you can just import different libraries, and then just use the best version of it for a certain plot. Okay. And database. So I'm not talking about SQL here, but it's more about in the Python ecosystem. When you learn Python, you need to have some experience connecting to databases, just so you know, you don't always need to write SQL queries. Because when you execute SQL, it always happens in a database and you have to use the SQL workbench. But there is a way for you to write Python code to submit SQL queries to be executed in the database, right? So you can sort of leverage this and to build the entire data processing pipeline in Python, even though some of the execution environment can happen on a remote server, but you control everything in your Python script, right? So SQL Alchemy or CyclePG2, there are some of these libraries that allow you to submit SQL queries basically using the Python API, okay? It's pretty powerful. And we talked about data collection. So there's, web scraping. There are a bunch of libraries such as Beautiful Soup, Selenium, Scrappy. Again, this is unfinished. To begin with, I think at least you need to know Beautiful Soup and how to parse XML and HTML pages. Right? If you would like to get more sophisticated, then you can do like Selenium. But again, if in your portfolio one of the projects is web scraping, I'll be super impressed, because that means when it comes to the time when we need you to, as a data scientist, to collect some data that's not in our database, you will be able to pull it off, and that would be very impressive. Yeah, and then on the big data side, then I think whether it's Dask or PySpark, I would recommend PySpark, because there's so many companies out there use Spark, especially in banks, in retail, telecommunication. They all use, Spark. Big tech, when they have a lot of users, it's a no-brainer to use Apache Spark. So Spark is definitely going to help you stand out. There are university courses that include Spark, but they teach it at very superficial level. So when I look at some of the portfolio project, it's just like, it just looked like an exercise. It's not a project at all, because they don't teach that. So when you work on big data, I think you need to sort of understand how end-to-end project work in big data. So you need to sort of be comfortable setting up some basic cloud infrastructure, right? You need to know what tool to use in the AWS ecosystem. You want to set up some sort of data collection process, and then do visualization, data exploration, and then the machine learning stuff. So that will be a more complete project, and it takes time and some experience. But having that will definitely give you some advantage. It's not always going to work out, but even just learning this, to upskill yourself is worth it. Because if you want to work on really interesting data projects and solving data science problem, you're going to work with big data, right? All right, so this is the the learning path, I guess. Some of the things you need to learn. I sort of skipped AI and deep learning. I'll talk more about it in my Python class tomorrow, because this is way more overwhelming compared to data science, and it's just a whole different discipline. And machine learning stuff. I won't spend too much time on that today, but just so you know, there are a lot of things you need to learn. People sometimes just get lost. And it's also kind of hard to teach everything in a very short amount of time. So sometimes there are shortcuts. The shortcut is basically just working on project. And you have to work on lots of small projects to gain experience. That is actually experience building. But just don't work on projects that has one thing to avoid, right? Is just you have a data set that's given to you, and then you do a bunch of visualization and you just train a machine learning model. I feel like that's just exercise. And during the learning phase, you have to do a lot of exercises like this. But when we talk about portfolio project, you have to think about what you want to build. So just keep that in mind, okay? That sort of helps you with the storytelling, because whenever you tell a story, right, you always have the beginning of the story, right, to sort of, do the introduction and stuff. So you have to follow that storyline when you build your own portfolio project. Okay. So we're reverse engineering this, after, I mean, we learn, gain the skills, right? We have the resume. The next step, well, the one step before that is just doing all the research. I think you need to, let me collapse this. Preparation, depending on which stage you're at. But I think preparation is very important. What kind of preparation you want to do before you jump into learning data science? First of all, I think you need to do some research, and have a try. Like, just have a few trial lessons and take an online course. It could be an online course, right? Or bootcamp free trial. I think you want to, or at least learn SQL, for example, and see if you like programming. And if you really don't like it, and you start complaining from day one when you learn SQL, that's a bad sign. Maybe this is not the right career choice for you. So you have to sort of give it a try. I think it's definitely going to worth your time, because it's a big investment, right? And when it comes to research, I think you need to understand the job market really well, right? I mentioned earlier that you need to read job descriptions. You sort of have an expectation, right? You want to understand like the salary and stuff, how well you're going to get paid, right? How many years it's going to take you to move on to the second job and get your promotion, the career path. Right. I think we have job market session in the future as well. We'll do that a couple of times a year as well. And of course, the pre-learning, which is, just the fundamental skills, are very important. So, but again, it's the SQL and Python stuff that I think you absolutely need to learn ideally before you join, let's say, a boot camp, for example. That will prepare you well for the more intense, workload, because boot camps can be very stressful, actually, because you would like to achieve results in a short amount of time, right? And you also, I think, you need to decide what is the best learning options, right? I think it needs to be a combination. First of all, you need to start with online courses, and you can just purely do online courses and become a data scientist. Data scientists can be completely self-learned, right? It's going to take a lot of time and effort. I think you have to sort of immerse yourself in the community. You have to like come to this kind of events, right? You have to keep learning, and also every day you sort of need to give yourself the motivation to keep going, because it's going to be a pretty long journey. There's so many things you need to learn, right? And there's also colleges, right, and universities, and there are boot camps, right? So just do your research and find the one that's the best fit, right? Boot camps, they're full-time, and there's also part-time. Part-time boot camps are more flexible, and you can keep your full-time job. But if you like results much faster, then there's the full-time boot camp or immersive boot camp options. If you're not in a rush and you think the master's degree is going to help you, or let's say you come from a bachelor's degree, you always want to do a master, if that's already on your roadmap, then you may want to go pursue a master's of data science. I would always recommend doing computer science over data science. Here's my point. If you do want to spend the time and money, because it's going to be way more expensive than the boot camp, right? Because it's going to take you maybe a year and a half and 2 years to do a master's. And you're going to spend a lot of time on assignments, right, and stuff. So like it's mandatory. So it could be stressful, but if that's the plan to get a master's, I think it will still be worth it. But choose computer science over data science, because I think you're going to learn more about the computer science principles. It's just going to help you become a better engineer. And once you have the computer science and all the strong coding skills, I think learning data science will be relatively easier for you, because most of the students who come from computer science background, they will feel like the data science bootcamp is not that challenging. They'll think it's okay. But for pure career switchers coming from a non-coding background, it could be very challenging for them or very stressful, which makes sense, because the computer science graduates spend 4 years on a degree. Right? Of course, they're going to be more skilled in programming and stuff, but that's my point. Like if you do, there's just so much more potential because in computer science, you can specialize in AI as well, right? So that's what, like, if I'm going to invest, the money and time, I'd rather just do a Master of Computer Science. But data science, I think you need to focus on the practical side. So boot camps actually can be more helpful. But there are masters of data science programs out there. But when you look at the portfolio project, it's like pretty much the same. So you can actually learn it faster in a probably relatively cheaper way. In Master of Data Science, one of the disadvantages is that you don't get to specialize, right? You don't get to specialize in, let's say, AI or large language models or generative AI. But of course, after that, if you would like to do a PhD, that's great. But if your goal is just job search, I personally think boot camps are better options. But the best options is always to start from online courses. And because there are people who are just really good at self-learning, finding the best information online, and they have the discipline, and then 6 to 12 months, right? Finish learning and build a lot of projects, and just work on interview skills. You're going to fail a couple of times, and then you get the job. So that is probably the best option. And then if you want to do a master, I just recommend doing computer science. But some people probably don't want to get that technical. Then masters of business analytics or data science is fine too. But boot camps is also a pretty good option. So that's what I would recommend. So that also concludes my my presentation today. Let's see if we have questions. I have more time now at the end. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Which cloud is used most in North America? So I would say from a data science analytics perspective, Azure is kind of both at AWS. I can tell you that 2-3 years ago, we did the job market analysis. I can tell you that AWS is always the most popular cloud. And recently, when we did the data collection, by the way, that report is going to be released soon, we noticed that Azure is more popular in Canada. That's very interesting. And GCP is always popular among retailers. But in United States, it's definitely AWS that's more popular. And it's way more popular among startups, by the way, right? AWS and GCP. And Azure, it's just most of the enterprises and big companies, they have such good relationship with, Microsoft, because they purchased a lot of solutions. So it's easier for them to sell the Azure services to companies. And also recently they acquired, or not acquire, but they have this, strategic partnership. They invested in ChatGPT, right? That could bring more clients to Azure as well. So yeah, it's interesting, but AWS, Azure, doesn't matter, to be honest. Just pick one of them. Yeah. What about choosing an analytics master's of data science master's? I honestly don't think you need to do a master's in data analytics. Because if you want to learn Python, SQL, I think doing an MBA with some sort of focus on analytics will be helpful. I know like some MBAs, they do predictive analytics and stuff, but it's not that technical. But if you do like a master's data analytics, I just don't think it's worth the money. And you can pretty much learn everything yourself. You're not going to learn very advanced stuff. So they probably add a lot of business related things. But yeah, from a technical perspective, SQL, Python, Tableau, Power BI, you can learn those in boot camps, online courses. I don't think it's worth your time to do a master. If you want to do master, just data science is better than data analytics, I would say. And computer science is probably better. You may disagree though, because not everyone wants to become a computer scientist. Like not everyone would enjoy doing, algorithms and data structures and operating systems. If that turns you off, then just don't do that. But if the reason why you want to do data science is because you want to go down the technical path, you might want to consider computer science. It's more rigorous, I can tell you. Yeah, that's because another trend I found is that the students who graduated from our data science boot camps, they got jobs, they worked for a couple of years. Students sometimes will come back to us and get a reference letter. They're using that to apply for master's program. Majority of them, there are only two scenarios. They're either doing computer science masters or they're doing a PhD. Oh, sorry. They're doing MBA. So, yeah. Exactly. So operations research, people don't give it enough credit. It actually have a big overlap with data analytics and data science. This absolutely help you. Yeah, and then you don't get enough like sort of resources out there compared to data science. But OR, it has a lot of use cases. This could be a advantage. So you definitely need to add data science skills. It's like sort of more, it's more like it's a hot area. It sounds more sexy, right? But really, like the skills you have is already data science skills, and a lot of data scientists don't know much about operations research. But I think for operation research folks, it's easier for them to learn data science. So it's not a bad choice. Like you're definitely on the right track. Yeah, this will help you for sure. We have people specifically ask us for operation research, and we'll tell them that unfortunately we don't teach that. It's just yeah. Okay, any other questions? And I'm going to share some of these resources with you. Okay, join our Discord, and you can find the recordings later this week or maybe early next week on YouTube. Oh, and also the career guide. You can click on the link to take a look at the career guide. It has I think it has a lot of details. I think we talk about use cases. There's some past event recordings, but I highly recommend you check out the job market and how to build this data science portfolio. Yeah, so these statistics are pretty old, but we're going to have a new report. So yeah, stay tuned. There's some stats for US and some for Canada. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, if there are no more questions, thanks for attending this session. We have, I think, upcoming events related to machine learning engineering, generative AI, data science job market. I think we have some panel discussions as well, where you get to talk to some of our alumni. Some of those alumni worked on real industry projects to build up their work experience with us. If you're interested, you can attend those sessions. You can find it on Discord, but you can find that on Meetup. I think most of you guys come from Meetup, so stay tuned. Thanks, everyone.